Most people think the strongest people are the ones who can explain everything calmly. Explain why they are late. Explain why they are tired. Explain why they said no. Explain why they feel hurt. But something strange happens the day you stop explaining yourself. People look at you differently. Some get uncomfortable. Some get angry. Some suddenly respect you. And you realize something very uncomfortable. You were never explaining to be understood. You were explaining so you would be accepted. And that changes everything. There is a kind of tiredness that sleep does not fix. It comes from explaining yourself too much. Explaining your decisions. Explaining your personality. Explaining your boundaries. Explaining why you cannot always be the strong one. You start to feel like you are always in a courtroom, always defending your life, always presenting evidence that you are a good person. And slowly, without noticing, you stop living and start performing. Imagine this. You are at work. Someone gives you extra work that is not yours. You want to say no, but instead you say, "I'm really sorry. I would help, but I have a lot today, and I didn't sleep well. And I also have something after work, and..." You keep talking. You keep explaining. You hope they will understand. You hope they will think you are kind. You hope they will not be upset. But inside, something feels small. Now imagine a different response. You smile gently and say, "I can't take that today." And then you stop talking. Silence feels scary at first. Very scary. Because silence feels like you did something wrong. But here is the psychology behind this. When you explain too much, you send a hidden message. The message is, "My decision needs your approval." But when you speak simply and stop, you send a different message. "My decision is already approved. By me." And people feel that. Even if you say very few words, they feel it in your tone, in your calm, in your silence. Many people who over-explain are not weak. They are actually very kind, very thoughtful, very empathetic. They don't want to hurt anyone. They don't want to be misunderstood. They don't want conflict. So they explain and explain and explain until they disappear from their own story. They become easy to convince, easy to pressure, easy to guilt. Not because they are weak, but because they care too much about being seen as good. Pause for a moment and think about this. How many times did you say yes when you wanted to say no, and then spent the whole night feeling heavy inside? How many times did you explain your feelings, and the other person still did not try to understand? How many times did you write long messages just to be misunderstood in one short reply? Sometimes the problem is not that you didn't explain well. Sometimes the problem is they understood, they just didn't agree. And you kept explaining, hoping agreement would come. There is a story about a man who understood this better than almost anyone in history. A man who was falsely accused, humiliated, and publicly shamed. And he never explained himself even once. There is a famous story from 18th century Japan about a highly respected Zen master named Hakuin. He was loved by his village. His reputation was flawless. One day, a young unmarried woman in the village discovered she was pregnant. Her angry parents demanded to know who the father was. Terrified, the girl lied. She pointed to the temple and said, "It was Master Hakuin." The parents were furious. The entire village turned against him. They marched to the temple, screaming insults, destroying his reputation, and demanding he take responsibility. If this were you or me, our trauma response would immediately trigger. We would panic. We would over-explain. We would write letters, scream our innocence, and desperately try to control their opinion of us. But Master Hakuin did none of that. He looked at the angry crowd, and he simply said 3 words. "Is that so?" When the baby was born, the family brought the child to him. He lost his reputation, his followers, and his honor. But he quietly took the baby in and cared for it with deep love. He did not explain. He did not defend. A year later, the young mother could no longer live with the guilt. She confessed to her parents that the real father was a young man who worked at the fish market. Hakuin was completely innocent. The parents were horrified. They rushed back to the temple, weeping, bowing, and begging for his forgiveness. They explained their terrible mistake and asked for the baby back. Hakuin did not demand an apology. He did not say, "I told you so." He gently handed the baby back to them and once again simply said, Is that so? Why did he do this? Because Hakuin understood one of the deepest psychological truths of human existence. Your peace cannot be tied to their perception. When you over-explain, you are saying, "Please understand me so I can feel safe." Hakuin was already safe. He knew who he was. He did not need the village to agree with reality for reality to be true. There is a quiet power in simple sentences. I don't like that. I'm not available. That doesn't work for me. I'm going to rest. I changed my mind. No long story, no long defense, no long apology. At first, people may be surprised, because they are used to the old version of you, the version that explained everything, the version that could be negotiated with, the version that could be convinced to change their mind. But something interesting happens over time. People start to listen more carefully when you speak less. Your words become heavier, stronger, more respected, because confidence is often quiet, and insecurity often talks too much. Here is the twist that most people don't expect. When you stop explaining yourself, you lose some people. Yes, you will lose some people. Some people only like the version of you that was easy to control, easy to guilt, easy to pressure, easy to confuse. When you stop explaining, you stop negotiating your boundaries. And people who benefited from your lack of boundaries will feel uncomfortable. But at the same time, you will find new kinds of relationships. People who ask, not assume. People who respect, not pressure. People who listen, not argue. People who don't need a 10-minute explanation to respect a 2-word answer. Pause again and think about this. What if you don't need everyone to understand you? What if peace is more important than being understood? What if your life becomes lighter the moment you stop trying to explain your heart to people who never tried to understand it anyway? One day, you will say something simple like, "No, I'm not coming. I don't want that. I'm tired." And instead of panic, instead of guilt, instead of explaining for 5 minutes, you will feel calm, very calm, because you will realize something important. People who respect you do not need long explanations. People who love you do not need long defenses. And people who only stay when you explain yourself all the time were never really staying for you. They were staying for your compliance. So there is a quiet change that happens when you stop explaining yourself. You talk less, but you feel more. You argue less, but you respect yourself more. You lose some people, but you find yourself. And in the end, that might be the most important thing you ever stop explaining. As you begin to explain yourself less, something else quietly begins to change. You start observing more. You start listening more. You start noticing things you never noticed before. The tone in someone's voice, the way people react when they don't get an explanation, the small changes in behavior, the things people say without actually saying them. When you stop trying to be understood all the time, you begin to understand everything around you. And this leads to a very interesting personality type, the people who notice everything, but say very little. They see the dynamics in the room. They notice the small inconsistencies. They remember what people said, how they said it, and when they said it. But they don't react immediately. They don't argue about every detail. And they don't reveal how much they actually see. In the next video, we'll explore the psychology of people who notice everything but say nothing, and why silence is often not ignorance, but awareness.